seat. She jumps out of the car and jumps into a ravine.
Well, there just so happened to be photographers around.
Right. Oh, that's right. That's right.
I think the whole thing was kind of planned.
Yeah, it was kind of set up. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And and poor Wilbur, you know, it was just this big political embarrassment, and Fanny, of course, just became an overnight pop culture sensation. If nobody heard of her before then, they certainly heard of her then.
Yeah.
Because of that incident, and it was just a huge scandal. And when I read that you were linked to him, I mean, in some ways, you could have been in that passenger seat, right?
Yes.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, it could have been you and not Fanny. So it was a huge story, and actually, it kind of has a happy ending because Wilbur came out publicly and acknowledged his alcoholism, which a lot of people wouldn't do back then. Nobody wanted to admit they were a drunk. So he spent the rest of his life counseling alcoholics, trying to get people to drive. So it kind of has a happy ending, but the impact, the ramifications of that story and on his political career, I just remember as a small boy because I would watch the news on television, and my mother always had Life magazine and Time and Newsweek and all that. So I would read that, and it was a really big story of its day, scandal, real big scandal.
It was.
So I'm finding out that you are linked to it, and I just had to get a chuckle out of that. I was like,
yeah, it was interesting time. It was an interesting time. More interesting time, of course, was when I met King Saud of Saudi Arabia.
That was my next question.
That was your next question.
Exactly. I got these people. Our listeners they've got to hear this. I don't mean to interrupt, but the setup is King Farouk is the leader of he's the king of Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Okay, and this is back in. I'm sorry. Let's set the time frame.
This was also in the. This was in the 60s.
So during the Johnson administration.
It was. I can't even remember. All I remember is I was working the Piccadilly Club in Miami Beach.
Right.
I can look on a newspaper thing and get the date.
Oh, that's okay. Well, we'll set the time frame.
But many things happened that I did, and I threw all of my contracts away years ago. I didn't think I'd ever need them, and I sure need them now.
Exactly.
The names of different clubs, agents, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, I met him. I was co-starring at the Piccadilly Club in Miami Beach with Blaze Starr. And how the meeting with the king came about is Prince Mansur and Prince Thamer, which were two of his favorite sons out of about, 120-some-odd children.
Right.
They came into the club one night. Now, they were all staying in Palm Beach. And the king wouldn't come to Miami because of the Jewish people. He didn't like Jewish people.
Right. Well, it's Miami Beach.
And yeah. And so anyway, the two princes, Prince Mansur and Prince Thamer, did with about 19 or 20 aides and bodyguards. And they sat at a long table, and I did my show. Blaze did her show. I did my show. I was the only one. They didn't want Blaze at the table. They wanted me, which made Blaze a little unhappy because if you remember, well, I can say this. Blaze was with a governor. I was with a king. So
that's right.
I got a one-upper.
Yeah, right? No, that's right.
And anyway, I met the two princes, and I sat and I joined them for a couple of drinks, and they invited me to lunch in Palm Beach the following day, and I said, sure, and they sent two limousines to pick me up, one to carry me in and the other in the back with bodyguards, and drove me to Palm Beach, went to the big hotel and had lunch with Prince Mansur and Prince Thamer and sat and played checkers all afternoon with them. And I gave them autographed photos, and not knowing that they were going to show their father. And I went back. They sent me back in the limousine to Miami Beach because I had to do my shows that night. So a couple of days went by, and I got an invitation for an audience with the king himself. And I thought, oh my goodness, I definitely wanted to meet a king. I'd, never been with a king in my whole life. So I said, sure. There was a fellow by the name of Becca Eunice who was the king's personal representative.
Okay.
And he spoke fluent English. And so he's the one that got in touch with me. Well, somehow, I don't know, there was a fellow from our government called Frank Malhoff that originally was from Saudi Arabia, but he worked for our government. I guess the CIA, whatever. Anyway, he called up at the club one evening, because he didn't have my home phone number, naturally. I didn't even know of the man. And he asked if he could meet with me. And he said it was very important that he had to give me something before he knew that I was going for a meeting with King Saud in Palm Beach.
Right.
So anyway, I met with Mr. Malhoff, and he gave me a letter, a sealed letter, that he said was very important, that they hadn't been able to get it through to the king, and so he was relying on me to do so. And, of course, the letter was sealed, and he told me a few words in Arabic to give. He said, don't turn loose of that letter to anybody. You have to give it to the king himself. So I figured, oh, holy crow, what the heck is all this about?
What have I gotten myself into?
Yeah, what have I got myself into? So I took the letter with me, and again, limousines were sent, but this time I had 4 bodyguards in the limo with me, and they had like swords. I mean, it was like movie stuff,
right,
that you don't think of anything. And I took my press agent, Cy Shapiro, who happens to be Jewish,
right,
and I took him. They wouldn't let him out of the car, and he had to stay in the limousine. When I went into, the king didn't stay in a hotel. He and I think 4 or 5 of his favorite wives they were leasing some millionaire's mansion or something in Palm Beach, and he had come over. The king, while he was over here, he had come over. He had a eye operation at the hospital in Boston.
Yes,
and he also had an appendectomy done that nobody knew. They just thought he was over here for the eye operation. But anyway, I left the limousine and was ushered into a sitting room in this mansion. And now Frank Malhoff had told me, don't drink anything. No water, no tea, no coffee, no nothing. Don't drink anything because they might put something in it, They
might spike your drink, and you could wake up in Riyadh or something.
Exactly.
Oh, my.
So, anyway, I was thirsty, my mouth was dry, and oh, my goodness, but I didn't dare order. Becca Eunice came into the room, asked if I wanted anything, and I said, no, thank you, and I was just dying of thirst. But anyway, he said that I had to curtsy when the king came into the room. Now, again, there was like about 20, 25 bodyguards, all sitting in chairs and everything in this big, big banquet room. So anyway, he showed me how to curtsy, and he told me, now make sure that you don't sit down before the king. The king has to sit first, and then you sit afterwards. So I said, okay. So anyway, I left the little room that I was in and went into this big, like, ballroom-type big room, and I saw all these men sitting in these chairs and everything. Well, then all of a sudden, like, the king walked in. He was in robes, like with the desert.
Typical Saudi garb, yeah.
Yeah. And so, of course, all the aides and everything, they stood, and I was standing there already, and I was, like, shaking like a leaf. And I must have been perspiring. I was a nervous wreck. So anyway, I did remember when he got over to me, I curtsied, and I felt like I was going to fall over. And I was so, I was afraid of losing my balance. I sat down. Well, there was a big commotion because I sat down before the king.
Oh, yeah.
And anyway, all he did was he patted me on the head, and he said he didn't speak English. Becca Eunice interpreted everything. So anyway, I saw his eyes were watering. Finally, he sat down on the sofa next to me, and I was just sitting there, and I was like, I know I was just shaking away. And anyway, I took out a Kleenex from my purse, and I'm dabbing at his eyes, saying, poor king, like you'd say to a dog, you know,
right.
You know, and dabbing at his eyes, and he thought that was sweet, I guess. And he asked Becca Eunice to ask me where I was from. He wanted to make sure I wasn't Jewish. So
oh, right, yeah.
I told him I was from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and, I told Becca Eunice, and he translated it, and that I was English, Irish, and Indian. So he was quite happy with that. So we conversed, you know, back and forth, the interpretation, blah, 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 blah. He said he had seen my photographs that his sons had showed him, and he said I was very beautiful, and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, I remembered I had that damn letter
right
stuck down my bra, you know. So I pulled it out, and it was a little damp because I had perspired so much, you know. So anyway, I said, Maktub min Farouk Malhas, letter from Frank Malhas. I'll never forget those words as long as I live. And I gave that letter to the king. He opened it, read it. Oh my God! He started screaming. He was and shouting, and everybody. Oh my goodness! It was pandemonium. And I thought, oh my goodness, what the heck is in that letter? And his ambassador Abraham glared at me. The ambassador Abraham didn't like me at all. And anyway, the letter was read, and anyway, after the ranting and raving, he asked Becca Eunice to ask me if I would go with him the next day back to Saudi Arabia and to Mallorca, to his castle in Mallorca, Spain. I said, I don't know about that. But now, in the meantime, dollar signs are clicking in my brain.
Right.
All this publicity, you know. So anyway, I said, I had a daughter, and I said, I'll have to let Becca Eunice know the following morning, you know, and they said it was very important because the plane was taken off late in the afternoon, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I went back out, and I was worried to death about Cy, wondering if he was still in that limo. Well, I got out there. He had been out there all that time. And so anyway, with nothing to drink or anything either.
Yeah.
So we were driven back to Miami Beach. And when I got back to Miami Beach, where they let me off, well, I met with Frank Malhas, and he asked about the letter, and I said I gave it to him. Then I told Frank Malhas that I was invited to go to Saudi Arabia and Mallorca, Spain. And he said, April, you can't go. And I said, but it's $1 million worth of publicity. And he said, you can't go, and you can't use the publicity now. There's an airspace that they needed in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And the king was granted the United States the use of that air base as long as no Jewish soldiers or anything was on that air base.
Right.
And so anyway, he said, you can't go because you can't do this publicity. You can't say anything about that. You can't do anything now. And we wouldn't have, if you got over there, he said, chances are you would never get back. And he said, once the king tired of you, you'd be just thrown to the wolves. So he said, we can't protect you.